past President Keith Bailey to do the introduction.
Thank you, Ann. Good afternoon, Tigers. Some people read the news on their computer, but have they forgotten that there are lots of better uses for a newspaper than, reading the news? You can use it as gift wrap, packed around fragile items in boxes, with a little vinegar, clean windows. You'll like Mrs. Scripps here. Use newspaper to replace kitty litter, line the bird cage, line the hamster cage, or train the puppy. Newspapers have a lot of food-related uses. You can wrap the proverbial fish, build a paper-mache volcano for your kid's science class, cover yourself in the rain, and if eating at ceviche. Our speaker today wears a couple of hats. As a journalist, he cares that you read the news before you wrap the fish. As the CEO of the Times Publishing Company, he just hopes that you buy the paper, then use it for whatever you want. After completing his education, our speaker joined the Times in 1978 and rose through the ranks until ultimately tapped to leave the paper in 2004. During his tenure, the Times has had to deal with the worst newspaper economy since the Great Depression. Nevertheless, our Times paper is widely regarded as one of the best in the country and has the highest circulation south of Washington, D.C. Pretty impressive stuff. Our paper, however, outgrew its bridges and on January 1, 2012, changed its name to the Tampa Bay Times. Apparently our speaker's office is now on a boat bobbing around in the bay. Of course, that was a calculated move that allowed Hillsborough readers to crawl out of their caves and psychologically accept a newspaper no longer named after their little brother town across the bay. Circulation has increased and the Tampa Trib is struggling. Does our speaker think that the Trib's travails are only a good thing? The journalist in him must see that competition between news sources provides a healthy variety of viewpoints. But the CEO in him probably was looking forward to watching the Trib set afire and pushed out on a raft under the Skyway Bridge. The Trib, however, has new owners and is now boldly pushing back on the Times' home turf. Happy or sad? Bring it on. What say you, Paul? On another front, the Times has a long reputation as existing on the more liberal end of the spectrum. The Times owns and operates PolitiFact. Somehow, they have declared themselves the judge and jury of what is and isn't true. Who gave PolitiFact, aka the Times, the moral authority to declare that mine or anyone else's pants are indeed on fire? In addition to serving on the boards of several important groups such as the Florida Council of 100 and the Committee to Protect Journalists, our speaker has served on the Pulitzer Prize Board since 2006 and was recently named its chair. For that, we are proud and share some reflected glory. So Tigers, read your Times before you use it up. Got it. Fellow Tigers, help me give a roaring welcome to the Times CEO.
Well, thank you very much. And thanks especially for the great idea of putting a news rack outside a couple of downtown restaurants. Here. Well, it's a great pleasure to be back in front of you today. The last time was at the dawn of 2012 in this very room, and we were looking ahead to a big political year. And as I recall, that preview included some attention to politics, including local politics, and the controversy over the decision by the Pinellas County Commission to take fluoride out of the water. So here we are, almost 18 months later, and in my view, there have been some good things that have happened since then. First, Pinellas County has some new commissioners. And there's a new balance on the Pinellas County Commission. Second, fluoride is back in the water. It's a great and lasting public health benefit of lots of people, including kids. And third, though it's not the reason we did the work, the Tampa Bay Times won a Pulitzer Prize spend a little time on how that process works. This is my ninth and final year on the Pulitzer Prize Board. We have very strict adherence to term limits on the Pulitzer Board. And that experience on the board has proven to be a very great pleasure, surpassed only by my day job and by my family. Last Thursday, during a luncheon at Columbia University in New York, we once again handed out 21 Pulitzer Prizes. 7 of those are in literature, drama, and music, and the other 14 are in journalism. This year, to get to 21 Pulitzer Prizes, we started with 2,637 entries. It gets down to 21 Pulitzer. So to win a Pulitzer is really difficult, and you have to make it through 2 rounds of judging. In the first round, juries were, and they whittled down all those entries to 3 finalists in each category. This year, the jurors in that process included 102 scholars, authors, musicians, and journalists. And then after the juries picked the finalists, in the second round, the Pulitzer Board reads all those finalists. My wife Karen has come to think of the period between Thanksgiving and Easter at our house as the library period. Especially on the weekend. Yes, I have to try that. And then the board gathers for 2 days each April at the J School at Columbia University of New York to decide who should get the prize. When I followed my great friend and mentor and patron Andy Barnes onto the Pulitzer Prize Board some years ago, Tom Friedman of the New York Times sent me an email and he said, "Welcome to the world's best book club." and of course it is that, but I've also come to think of it as a wonderfully genial debating society. Because without fail, the discussions reveal a very deep reading of the finals. The differences are respectful and friendly, but they are also full-throated, and they are settled ultimately by a show of hands. Among the board members, no score is kept, and no scores are settled. Any board member with a business or personal connection to a finalist is gently banished the hallway for the discussion and vote. So some people ask, "Well, yeah, you want a Pulitzer Prize this year, editorial writing, that must be because you're on the board." No, if it was on the board, we would have won 3 full Pulitzers. People may disagree with the results in any category, but in 8 years on the board, I have never sniffed even a whiff of doubt about the integrity or the commitment of every board member to recognize the very best work. It's a human process, but our process is still intellectually honest as humans can make. This year, like every year, I left New York struck by the quality of the finalists, many of which, of course, did not win a Pulitzer Prize because we have 3 nominees for each prize. This year, the category of runners-up included the winner of a National Book Award, a Harvard historian who had won the Pulitzer twice before, and a collection of short stories that won the richest international prize for short story writing. In journalism, the finalists but not winners included an expose from the Chicago Tribune that the fire retardants in furniture are mostly worthless and toxic, but an industry campaign of lies bamboozled government officials, especially in California, into requiring those chemicals anyway. Other finalists in journalism: 1, triggered a review of 20,000 criminal cases based on questionable forensic profoundly disabled who were unable, of course, to care for themselves. And 3, demonstrated how supposedly non-profit hospitals in North Carolina are running big surpluses while paying their executives 7-figure salaries and skimping on charity care. And remember, those are finalists that didn't win a Pulitzer Prize. So what makes, I think, this year's crop of Pulitzer finalists even more remarkable is that punishing economic pressure on most of the news organizations that have sponsored the work. My first year on the Pulitzer Board was in 2006, and that was a high watermark in advertising revenues for American newspapers. Rick Edmonds here from my friend from the Poynter Institute follows this stuff very closely. If I get it wrong, let me know if it was 2006 was that. Since then, since 2006, the combination of the economic crisis that has affected everybody and in news, the competition from digital alternatives for advertising has sent ad revenues plummeting by more than half. In that short period. Today, there are 15,000 fewer journalists working in American newspapers than in 2006. People outside this wonderful bracket, which I don't go to my working life, know, have heard, like you, that these commercial enterprises that have created most journalists are going through a rough stretch. And so they ask, often you may wonder today, whether the troubles have taken a toll on the Pulitzer Prizes. And the answer to their routine surprise, and frankly a little bit to mine, is this: not one bit. The caliber of work that gets to the Pulitzer Board is as strong as it was at that first meeting I attended. Well, how to account for such a paradox? I think the answer, at least in large measure, is that journalistic ambition burns both in organizations and in individuals, despite the financial challenges. Bankruptcy may no longer carry particular stigma, especially after these last several years, but it remains a sign that an enterprise is under real financial strain. And by my count, 11 of the 42 finalists in this year's journalism categories came from journalists working at companies that have sought the shelter of bankruptcy protection. So 4 of the 14 Pulitzer winners this year. You can feel the strong pulse of journalistic spirit in organizations big and small. Toward one end of the scale, journalists from the New York Times this year won 4 Pulitzers. Like the other winners from the Times, its entry for international reporting was hugely demanding and expensive. It was on corruption among the government of China. But beyond the salaries and the newsprint it took to publish that work, the incalculable cost may be in revenue lost to the New York Times, because the work imperils the company's investments in China, that huge and growing market. At the other end of the scale, our prize for national reporting this year went to a small startup with a full-time staff of 7 people and a history that goes back only 6 years. An organization with neither much resource nor history took the prize in a category that included all the usual suspects and plenty of heavyweights. But the vast majority of our prizes are still going to those traditional news organizations which are commercially based, not funded as nonprofits or philanthropic causes, and which still create the vast majority of news, local, national, international. stake in this. And here's my example. The gold medal for public service this year went to the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel for a wonderful bit of report. It turns out that the cops in South Florida, a lot of cops in South Florida, have wet feet. And they are driving their cars, particularly when they're off duty. It doesn't matter whether they're on duty, it's not whether they're chasing bad guys. They're off duty. They were roaring along at huge speeds. There were accidents with cops. So the Sun Sentinel had this wonderful idea. They knew that all these police cars had transponders in them for the sun pass, right, on the expressways. And those transponders record the time at which everybody passes, right? So they had this wonderfully great idea. We have the Pulitzer Prize Board step right in. I wish we thought of that. So if a police car passes point A at midnight, and it passes point B at 12:01 a.m., and the distance between those 2 points is 2 miles, as it was, that car was going at 120 miles an hour on average between those 2 points. That's the way the math is. And further, the records would show whether that officer was responding to a call or was he just late for work, coming from Broward County to get to his job in Dayton, for example. And there had stacks and stacks of records. It was terrific work. It was terrific work. There was a moment they had on video in the modern way where the reporters walked into the Miami Police Department and they explained what they'd done. And there's a stack of documents. And the port lieutenant has been sent out to deal with it, in this, says, okay, all right, so, we'll say, Rob, how many of those are ours? All of them. All of them. So, but my question is this. The Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel is one of those news organizations whose company has been through bankruptcy. The Chicago Tribune Company. It is a sign of some strength. And so the question I leave you with is this. Because if there aren't folks like that at the Fort Lauderdale Sun Sentinel around to do that kind of report, who will? Who will? Thank you very much.
It's time for our question and answer period. Paul, we'll let you choose the first question for the Grand Tiger Award.
Thomas Churchill Dodd.
Tommy,
That's an honor to me, Tommy.
your competitor, Tampa Tribune, until recently was owned by Media General Corporation. Then last year, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway bought Media General. All its assets and all its newspapers, with one glaring exception, the Tampa Tribune. So curious minds want to know, what is there peculiar about the Tampa Tribune that would make it unattractive to a value investor like Warren Buffett?
Well, count me among those curious minds, Tommy. I haven't had the pleasure yet of asking Mr. Buffett, but if you talk to him before I do, would you let me know? Let me just be general. Mr. Buffett in the past has said that he prefers to invest in newspapers. That, by the way, was one of his first investments in newspapers. He's been a long owner of the Buffalo News in Buffalo, New York. then he sort of soured on newspapers for a while. His original line back in the great old days was that newspapers were such an easy business that if you had a family portfolio of business and that if it included a newspaper, that you could safely entrust the newspaper to your idiot brother-in-law. Because even he couldn't screw it up. But then he soured on newspapers for a while. He thought there was way too much competition. And then he's come around again to buying some newspapers. He has said that he's particularly interested in newspapers with a strong connection to their communities and are performing a unique role that only a newspaper can play and has a strong local voice. And then he said, I think, that there's been some speculation anyway that he thinks that that's more prominent in some smaller communities than in some larger metro areas, though I'm told that the commercial struggles are just as strong in the smaller cities as they are in the big ones these days. But, so, you know, why he chose not to, I think he would like to avoid competitive markets. And, you know, we have about 2/3 of the market share in the Tampa Bay market between the two organizations. So he prefers markets that aren't, we don't have that kind of competition here.
Peter Golema, the Koch brothers are talking about purchasing a fairly large string of newspapers in this country. Can you talk a little bit about the politicization of newspapers, please?
Well, the Koch brothers say that they're not. The Koch brothers are, you know, very big in business. They own a lot of paper manufacturing companies, including the, you know, those makers, household tissue, etc. And they are conservative toward the libertarian side of the conservative strain. And so some people have expressed worry about their potential interest in the Tribune Company newspapers coming out of bankruptcy and now for sale. They've said that they're interested in newspapers as a business proposition rather than as house organs for their conservative points of view. And until we see otherwise, I have to take them at that word. Rupert Murdoch some years ago inspired quite a lot of fears when he bought the Wall Street Journal that he would turn it into, you know, some kind of Fox News in print. I don't think it happened. The journal on its editorial page, I think, has a conservative bent. My friend Paul Tash, another member of the Pulitzer Prize Board, and I are great friends. Our politics differ in some respects, but you know, I take them at their word until we see it.
This question is not about education or the lens. It's about good government that we all care about. I can't understand why the editorial board urged a split council to spend $869,000 to the architect to keep up pre-construction costs when it was apparent at the vote that the petitions were going to put the referendum on the ballot, and there was a good possibility that, whether we call it payment to the architect or the lens, $869,000, that's a lot of taxpayer money, and I just don't understand why you supported that, or the editorial board supported it.
It's a great question, Linda, and I would say, without distancing myself from that opinion at all, that the editorial board represents, you know, a collective view and a collective voice of the newspaper. I think the editorial recommended that we should proceed because this was a project that had been thoroughly discussed and vetted in all kinds of governmental process, and that we needed to keep things moving to the extent, but not with entire sets of working drawings and all the kinds of the final stages. This remains the plan for downtown St. Petersburg for the replacement of the pier. We've got 3 months to go, and
back to your comments about the Pulitzer process. So when you're all having discussions about a book or an article, is the priority how well it's written, the subject matter, or the way it makes you feel? How do you determine what's the best?
Great question, Corey. And each of the categories has its own language. So, for example, in public service, which is the gold medal prize and no doubt the most prestigious of all the Pulitzer Prizes, one of the real categories is, did this improve public life for the public? What was the service being done? Did it make a difference? There's a category of feature writing. The Times was also, our Times was also the full finals in that category. It sure went to the New York Times. But in that category, it's principally about the writing. So it varies a little bit. In each of these, I would say one of the questions I always bring, I must be one of the questions I always bring is, what's new about this? You know, how much new ground does this break? And then also, it should be well done as a matter of practice. It should be well written. It should be engaging. Some of this stuff is extraordinarily long. And my view is that no Pulitzer Prize winning work waits until the jump of the third story to announce itself. So there's a variety, but it should represent excellence in all respects. Yes, Jim.
Jim Gillespie. Does your editorial staff and writers like Bill Maxwell and Garth Diggins and some of your reporters give you feedback on the kind of letters that are not published in the Times, which give you the temperature, the rigidness, the anger, the hostility, the happiness, the satisfaction of all of the readers of the Times? Do you get a picture of that? And does it differ from other times that you've been in the business in terms of its significance and pronounced character?
The short answer to your specific question is no. I don't get the letters that the correspondence that they deal with directly. We have a lot of ways to keep track, obviously, of the mood and the climate. Sometimes we systematically measure it, and we send out pollsters to do the kind of reader satisfaction work and interest work that is often very helpful to us in trying to do it. I was saying at lunch at our table, I think away from the Times, just generally, I think this is still a time of some real stress in the world. People having been through this real economic struggle over the last 6 years, generally, and everybody. So I think that shows up in anger and emotion sometimes. I listen to my long-suffering assistant on to deal with somebody that got in his paper who seems to be, we doesn't happen very often, but when it does, sometimes it's not just about not getting your paper, there's something else that's going on. So I do think that there is still some stress that shows up in the general public discourse. Peter.
Peter Schorsch. I just want to say, as a blogger in the community, it is an honor to be a remora swimming along the great white shark that is the Tampa Bay Times. Be very healthy. I just what was that setup? No, honestly, I could ask you 1,000 questions. I would like to talk about Pulitzer Prizes and new media. Last year's Pulitzers, it was noteworthy that the Huffington Post and Politico won Pulitzers, but the Wall Street Journal and I believe the Washington Post did not, and it was taken as an indictment of old media versus new media. I'd like to hear your thoughts on new media, and specifically, as they win awards, will reporters go to the new media?
Let me just take this year. The National Prize in Reporting went to an outfit called Climate Change News, which is great work on the biggest oil spill immense petroleum that comes from oil shale, and which will be carried by the Keystone Project. It's terrific work, just for straight. But I would say still that the vast majority of these prizes are being done by the more established commercial journalism organizations rather than by the ProPublica's, which is does great work. Dr. Paul Tash has done a wonderful job in this circuit, which is still being run as a philanthropic enterprise rather than as a commercial one. So whether people will move, I would say it has more to do with paychecks than it does with prizes. Yes, sir.
Jim Baker. I'm just interested if the Times and the Poynter Institute is going to continue to support the Reading Festival the way they have in the past. That's one of the real assets of our community.
Well, thank you so much. And it's been our pleasure to do that for some years, and I know it's on the schedule again for this year. You know, it's not just the newspaper publishing world that has been under some financial stress, it's also the book publishing world, and the publishers aren't advancing quite as much money for book tours these days by their authors, which used to be, one of the good ways to get people here in our premises for the Festival of Reading. But it's on the schedule again for this year. Right there, we're in the neighborhood already, huh?
Hi, my name's Lois Freeze. When I walk past the newsstand, I can hear Ivan Pence screaming about the atomic plant in Crystal River. And I can hear others on your paper screaming about Medicaid expansion not having happened here and our legislators paying $8.34 for their health care. I'm sure everyone here is aware of those statistics and what's going on, but I have people in my life who think they know what's happening, who have absolutely no idea. What could you recommend that we do to make other people aware of what's going on? Something that we could really do to help people be educated.
You could go door to door selling subscriptions. Don't you? Well, I think one of the things that happens, just to be a little bit trifling serious here, one of the things that happens is that our voice on issues here within the Tampa Bay area carries more weight than it does on state issues in Tallahassee, right? Because our sphere of influence, while considerable throughout the state, is not as great as it is right here. That's why that editorial campaign to put fluoride back in the water, and when the commission refused to get a new commission, worked. It would have been tough to have that same kind of impact on a statewide issue, but we live here and our voice carries an awful lot in Pinellas County and the Tampa Bay region. And so, I think what happens is elections have consequences, and there are rhythms and cycles. And to the extent that voters feel that they're not being listened to and heard on these issues, then it's up to them to elect new people. And sometimes that happens. I think some of that happened in the Bill Dudley Frank Farkas race. Bill Dudley ran very much on the nuclear cost recovery issue, and frankly voted for it. And I think that's one of the reasons in a close race they won for Bill. I'm sorry. Thank you. This is the early onset. Anthea.
Anthea Penrose. Paul, has there been any discussion in your office and the leadership times about the comment sections of the online version? I find them very offensive mostly. They're still anonymous. Is there a discussion about making people be as public
because they aren't printed. That's the end.
Yes, there's a lot of discussion about that, and we've taken, I think, some steps toward accountability, toward requiring registration for comments to be posted. There are occasional stories that we know will not bring out the best in certain members of the community, so we just disable the comment section. So that, just, we can come with this. But again, it's sort of back to this question of the news organization as the filter versus the news organization as the facilitator. And so we're trying to strike that balance appropriately in the digital age as well. Yes, sir, David.
This will be the last question.
Dick Avery. I'm a big fan of your political reporting, and she's that category deliberately. Because whenever I read the reports about the abuses that have taken place by our Public Service Commission, I have to ask why there is no or has been no grassroots initiative for a constitutional amendment to make them publicly elected and to prohibit the risk of free speech battles, contributions from the utilities in such an election.
Everything comes around, doesn't it? I remember when they were elected, when the Public Service Commissioners were elected, and they became appointed as a reform, because the elected officials had their campaigns largely financed by the utility companies. But I'm starting to think that that question is fresh and deserves a fresh look, because the political culture, I don't want to use the word advisedly. I think the political culture in Tallahassee is in many ways corrupt. I do not mean that it's corrupted in terms of people are taking bribes for personal use. But I think the process has become in many ways corrupt to the point that individual citizens and the public good is being widely and clearly overlooked. And I think there's probably no better example of that than both in the shutdown of the plant at Crystal River and in the continued collection of fees for the plant that may never get built. So thank you very much.
Paul, thank you so much for being here. As a token of our thanks, we'd like to give up our Carving Up a Politician Month for your time to be here. We appreciate it. We hope we didn't carve you up too terribly badly.